Welcome back, everyone, to the Los Angeles Chargers franchise here on Madden 18. As last episode, the Chargers went to Houston and beat the Texans 48-24 in the AFC Championship, as the game was pretty close throughout, but then the Chargers pulled away, ending the game on a 28-0 run. So before we see who the Chargers are going to be playing in the Super Bowl, it will be either the Seahawks or the Vikings. We're going to look at the injury report, as two new players got injured, and that was Melvin Gordon and Miles Ellerbe, and both of them will be unable to play in the Super Bowl, as Melvin Gordon tore his shoulder and Miles Ellerbe broke his thumb. The Chargers will have a few players return from injuries, as backup running back Wayne Coleman will come back, outside linebacker Carol Poole will come back, and rookie wide receiver Spencer Bailey will come out. Bailey had a great year, but got hurt like week 6, and was out ever since, but he, as well as Carol Poole and Wayne Coleman, will be back in time for the Super Bowl. So we're going to look at who makes the Pro Bowl, but after that, we'll find out who the Chargers are playing. Regardless of who the Chargers will play, the Chargers will probably be the underdog. I do not know who is in the Super Bowl yet. Either the Seahawks or the Vikings. We're going to find out together, but meanwhile, we will see which Chargers are in the Pro Bowl. So, of course, Mason Conway, the NFL MVP, that is 1. Rashad Pickney, that is 2. So far the Chargers have 2. Make that 3 with Gordon Sturgeon, who did not start for a good chunk of the year. So the Chargers have 3 offensive players. Melvin Ingram, that is number 4. Still at 4. No linebackers. Jocko Stanley, the defensive back of the year, is number 5. Neither of the safeties. James Brandstater, that is number 6. Drew Kaiser, that is number 7. So 7 Chargers make the Pro Bowl. 3 offensive players, 2 defensive players, and 2 special teamers. So now, without further ado, the Chargers will be playing in the Super Bowl the Minnesota Vikings, a battle of 2 teams who have never ever won a Super Bowl championship. Where will the Super Bowl be played? It will be played in Dallas. Interesting. The Vikings finished 13-3. The Chargers finished 10-6. And the Vikings are favored, as I said. The underdog will probably be the Chargers no matter what. Spencer Bailey is back. He is the number 1 receiver, even though his rating isn't as high as Mike Williams or Rashad Pickney. Bernard Clark will move back to left outside linebacker as well. So let's take a look at the Vikings stats. We'll also see how many of their players made the Pro Bowl as well. So the Vikings in free agency this past year, they ended up signing Ben Roethlisberger from the Pittsburgh Steelers. Ben Roethlisberger has won a few Super Bowl rings with the Steelers. In his first year with the Vikings, he has brought them to the Super Bowl. Roethlisberger finished with about 4,000 yards, 26 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. Running the ball, Dalvin Cook ran for 1,080 yards and 7 touchdowns. Marquise Garner had 14 touchdowns of his own. Stephon Diggs and Eric Decker each had the same amount of receptions. The rookie Brian Herrera from Texas A&M led them in touchdowns, and he also led them in yards. Blocking, they have not great tackles. Pierce Clay is young, former first-round pick, and Trey Chapman is very young as well. But other than that, their inside offensive line seems very good. Eric Kendricks led them in tackles. Tackles for a loss, 14 from a veteran, Linval Joseph, and sacks, 14.5 from another veteran, Everson Griffin, 10.5 for Joseph, 9.5 for Daniil Hunter. Interceptions, 5 from Eric Kendricks. He might have won like Defensive Player of the Year or something with those numbers. He must have won something. 3 for Xavier Rhodes and 3 for the rookie from Louisville, Alan Turner. Kicking, Stephen Gostkowski, another multi-time Super Bowl winner of the New England Patriots, had a very solid year. And their punter is Ryan Quigley. So we'll see how many Vikings made it. No, not yearly awards. Oh, I accidentally simulated too far. Oopsies. Well, I'm dumb. So, yeah. So let's take a look at how the Vikings have done this year. They beat the Titans week 1. Panthers week 2. I almost said Packers. Redskins, Colts, Bears, and Buccaneers. So they started the year on a 6-game winning streak. The Chargers did not start off the season well, unlike these Vikings have. Some of these games were pretty close. That was within 1 possession. That was within 2 points. That was within a possession. That was within a possession. And that was within a possession. So within their first 6 games, 5 of them were by 7 points or less. Then they ended up losing to the Chicago Bears. And before their bye week, they beat the Detroit Lions in pretty convincing fashion. Then they opened up their non-bye week schedule with a loss to the Packers, and then they went on a nice winning streak after that, beating the Jaguars, Cardinals, Saints, and Lions, all of which were within one possession except for the Jaguars game, and debatably the Cardinals game. The Cardinals could have scored a touchdown and got a 2-point conversion, which would have tied it up. They ended up losing to the Texans week 15, who, remember, the Chargers just beat in the AFC Championship, and then they finished out the regular season with beating the Falcons and the Packers. In the postseason, they beat the Eagles. Beat it, is that a word? They beat the Eagles 14-10. Carson Wentz threw 2 interceptions and did not play well, throwing about 50%. Roethlisberger, he had a pretty good game running the ball. Dalvin Cook played solid. Joe Mixon played solid. Receiving, Brian Herrera played great. So did Stephon Diggs. No one really stood out for the Eagles. Defensively, sacks. A lot of sacks for the Eagles, actually. 2.5 sacks from Brandon Graham, 2 for Derek Barnett, 1 for Fletcher Cox, 1 for Parker Shields, half for Sidney Jones, and half for someone else. The Vikings only had 1, that was by Sharif Floyd. And interceptions, 1 was by Xavier Rhodes, and 1 was by Demetrios Burgess. And then last week, they ended up beating the Seahawks 35-17 in Seattle, so the Super Bowl is going to be a battle of the 2 seeds. Russell Wilson did not have a great game, about 200 yards, touchdown, and a pick through 58%. Roethlisberger, not a great game, but he played okay. Running the ball, Dalvin Cook played well. Marshall Hageman had 2 touchdowns, and the Vikings stopped the Seahawks' run pretty well. Receiving, Douglas Schultz, I don't know how to say that. He had a pretty solid game for the Seahawks. No one stood out for the Vikings. Defensively, 13 tackles for Bobby Wagner, that is a lot. Sacks, only 2 for the Vikings, 1 by Daniel Hunter, 1 by Everson Griffin, but the Seahawks got 0 sacks. And then interceptions, 1 by Earl Thomas and 1 by Xavier Rhodes. So that about covers it. Next episode will be Super Bowl 55 in Dallas, Texas, between the Minnesota Vikings and the Los Angeles Chargers.